Welcome to the Healing Pain Podcast with Dr. Joe Tatta. Each week, we interview top experts in physical therapy, pain science, and integrative pain care. You'll learn the most up-to-date information for treating and reversing persistent pain. This podcast is for educational purposes only and not intended to be used as personalized medical advice. And now, here's your host, Dr. Joe Tatta.
Hey friends, welcome back to this week's episode of the Healing Pain Podcast. This week we're discussing how to use functional nutrition to treat and alleviate chronic musculoskeletal pain. My guest this week is Aparna Natarajan. Aparna is a certified nutrition specialist with a master's degree in nutrition and functional medicine. She is a clinician, a researcher, and an educationist who has contributed to the Institute for Functional Medicine's meal planning program as a subject matter expert. She's cultivated an understanding of the mind-body connection and combines both the science as well as the art of nutrition, Reiki, and emotional freedom technique. On today's episode, we'll discuss the importance of nutrition in overcoming chronic pain, as well as the benefits of an elimination diet for those living with chronic pain. And if you enjoyed today's episode, make sure to stay tuned because I have a perspective paper that is being published in PTJ, the Journal of Physical Therapy, on the topic of nutrition and chronic pain, specifically for the physical therapy profession, although it relates to other professions as well. That's moving through the peer-reviewed process right now as we speak. For those of you that have published before, as you know, sometimes that can be a bit of a slow process, but it'll be out, rest assured, hopefully sometime in early 2022. For now, let's begin and let's meet Aparna and let's learn about the importance of nutrition for chronic pain. Hi there, Aparna. Thanks for joining me this week.
Thank you, Joe. It's a pleasure to be here.
I'm excited to speak with you about functional nutrition and the impact it can have for people living with pain. You are a functional nutritionist. I know you've been practicing for a number of years. I know you've done some research in this area, as well as you have lots of clinical experience. Let's talk about some of your research first. I know you have it's a brilliant case study that you did on the impact of an elimination diet for someone with chronic pain. Tell us how that came about and tell us kind of the overview of that case study.
So I was part of a clinical program where a bunch of clinical nutritionists got together, and we recruited people or worked with our own clients. And we decided to implement the elimination and detox diet plans that is created by the Institute for Functional Medicine. And I'm one of the subject matter experts and planners of those meal plans as well. And my client was from South Africa. And she presented with several symptoms when she first came to me. And some of them were all digestive issues, nausea, bloating, very low appetite, chronic joint pain, pain in her shoulders. She couldn't lift her arm, and pain in her knees that caused her to not exercise. So but she was an athlete in her younger years. She had had 2 knee surgeries, and she had fatigue, headache, and several other symptoms, such as, these were the main symptoms. So we decided we started with the elimination diet, which eliminates typical allergens, foods that have high immunogenicity. And so those are wheat, corn, dairy, pork, beef, peanuts, shellfish, and dairy. And instead of these, we substituted or introduced foods that were, we used non-dairy products like nut milks, if possible, coconut, and and sugars and coffee is also eliminated in this. Green tea is used. And when we started doing that, I implemented that, but I looked at it in layers. So the first thing I wanted to work with her was on her GI issues, bloating, appetite, and then we worked on the elimination piece. And what happened towards the end, within the first two weeks, all of her digestive issues resolved, including, and she was her appetite increased because she was drinking a lot of coffee. And as we reduced the coffee, actually we had to eliminate it in her case. And we incorporated digestive enzymes to improve the upper digestion. She started eating better, and her digestive issues went away, and partly because of the digestive enzymes. She increased the nutrient content, nutrient density of her foods, and by week 4, she started lifting her arm. By week 5 and 6, she started walking and exercising. By week 9, she could go all the way up. And this was a chronic 8-year problem. She had not been able to move her joints or her shoulder and knees without pain for 8 years. And within 9 weeks, we were able to see this change. So that's the gist.
So just walk us through again the elimination part, because there's lots of different variations of elimination diets. So it can be as simple as one food. It can be upwards of 10 foods or whole food groups. Tell us specifically what was eliminated in this case study.
Right. So the elimination diet is looking at creating. I'll just tell you what elimination diet is not. Elimination diet is not a diet that is low calorie or just removing foods that, that seem to be, like a fad thing. Oh, let's just remove wheat or let's just remove dairy. It's not that. It's a well-studied, well-evidenced program that says that there are certain foods that seem to increase oxidative stress in the body. And there are certain foods that seem to increase immunogenicity in the body, especially in the digestive tract, which is full of, our immune system is largely in the digestive tract. And these proteins in these foods can escape through the intestine and affect other body parts because they are causing an immune activation, because our immune system says, okay, there is danger here. We see things that we don't know. And so wheat, and what they found is over many, many studies, there are 6 main food problems. Now you can approach it in different ways. You can take one food out at a time, and then, or you can take out a set of foods that have been, which have good evidence for increasing oxidative stress. So wheat, dairy, and I said beef and pork, and these shellfish and nuts or peanuts. They're not the same, but these you can take out all nuts and peanuts, or just take out peanuts. When you try to, instead of trying to eliminate one at a time, you can actually eliminate all of this just for a week, 2 to 3 weeks. That's all we're looking at, and look to see where the how much of a change you see in symptom picture. You can also use a food sensitivity test, but food sensitivity tests are not always, don't always show all kinds of reactions, because it's just not the IgE and IgG tests. We have to look at complements and activation of other immune system, immune factors that are not always captured. Some tests do, like the MRT, but so that's another approach. And I use that approach when someone comes to me who's already done elimination diets. Mm. But if you're starting fresh, this is a person who's not actually ever tried it. Oh yeah, I tried eliminating 1 or 2 things, nothing really worked. You can take this approach. And in our case, in this case of this case study, coffee and sugar were the ones coffee, sugar, and dairy were the ones that needed most attention. It wasn't even wheat in this case. So you see, and the other things we did eliminate because of pain is, for pain, you want to look at nightshades and oxalates. Because nightshades, again, there isn't a lot of data on this. There are only a few case series. And so we know, some of us know that, but it's worth a trial because we're going to introduce it back. So we want to just try it first. Oxalate, on the other hand, in some cases, they are crystalline substances that can get deposited in cartilage and bone. And because they are crystalline, they tend to be pokey. And a lot of people will have pokey pain in the joints. And that it could be an indication of sensitivity to oxalates. So in this case, there were a few foods that were rich in oxalate that we did remove, but there weren't a lot of food. The interesting part in my case study was the elimination diet was I did a lot of adding because the person that I was working with wasn't eating enough. So we took all the foods that when introduced can reduce oxidative stress, provide the nutrients the body needs, and help resolve the problems that are being presented.
So in this particular case, because there are the elimination period is also flexible. Probably gold standard is a minimum of 3 to 4 weeks.
Right.
Other people with more chronic autoimmune conditions may have to be on this as long as, the elimination part as long as 6 months to a year. How long did the elimination period last in this case study?
We just did a 3-week elimination.
Okay, so it was a briefer. So all those foods you mentioned came out, and they just came out for 3 weeks.
Right. But we never reintroduced sugar and coffee.
Right. So you found that coffee was probably a GI irritant, is what I'm guessing in this case. Is that correct?
Actually, excessive coffee. So the person it was not 1 or 2 cups, 6 to 8 cups of coffee is what we were talking about.
That's a lot of caffeine.
It's not just the caffeine. There are other nutrients that actually can increase. And the data comes from rheumatoid arthritis more than from osteoarthritis, which this person was moving towards, even though she didn't have a diagnosis. Her mother had a diagnosis of osteoarthritis. So the likelihood that she was going towards that is pretty high, according to research. If there's a family history, then there is a chance of you getting a similar pattern if you don't take care of it, at least per research. And in fact, the BMJ said that people walking into a general practitioner with generalized pain, if they only use the standard of care, which is NSAIDs or physiotherapy, but no nutrition or other programs as part of the care program, they actually ended up with an osteoarthritis diagnosis 8 years later, an average of 8 years later. So this was one of the papers that I was reading as part of my case, putting my case study together. And she was right at that 8-year mark where she couldn't even raise her hand at that time. So, and she does have a family history of osteoarthritis as well. But so we wanted to look at foods. And so coffee has other compounds that can affect joint mobility. This study actually comes out of a rat study where they give large amounts of coffee, not just caffeine. And it happens even with decaffeinated coffee. And they found that it was specifically for female rats as well. And they found there was problems in articulation and with coffee. So that was a very rare study. I just found that. But as soon as the coffee came down, appetite improved, nutrition status improved. She was eating, I did a quick estimate of how much calories she needed in a day, and she was eating only 56% of the required, just for basic everyday life, to keep the resting metabolic rate at normal. She was eating 56% less than that, and so it was quite an interesting thing to see how nutrients, when you start taking it, pain starts coming down.
Yeah, so there is high level, basically there are meta-analyses now on the effectiveness of elimination diets for chronic pain.
Yes.
And as you mentioned, certain people react to certain foods, other people, don't react to food. So nutrition is always a key component and something we want to have our eye on keenly with people with chronic pain. RA and OA are two very different conditions. And even OA itself is actually a different condition. I just want to comment on that BMJ article so that our listeners, there's a lot of nuance in research studies.
Right.
Typically, the group of patients who progress to having OA without a nutrition intervention are typically those who are also obese, because obesity is a pro-inflammatory condition and nutrition has such an impact on inflammation. But I just want to go back and just clarify that if you see a physical therapist but don't have nutrition, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to develop osteoarthritis, though. We have to look at that based on someone's phenotype. So we could have someone who's thin that still has developed osteoarthritis and does very well with a PT program. But if they're obese and they have an inflammatory condition, which obesity is inflammatory, if nutrition isn't not a component of it, then they may be more likely to progress OA. Not that they're actually 100% going to have it. I think that's just important, right? Because I want to be cautious that we don't give a broad spectrum recommendation to what exactly is going to happen, because everyone's biochemistry is unique, and you know that from functional nutrition, right?
It wasn't that all of them were. They were seemed to be more likely when the inflammation was higher. That's exactly what the point was.
Yeah, in obesity populations, that's typically. So was there anything else that was personalized for her? Obviously, I love the perspective of making sure that the healthy food went back in, because when people look at elimination diets, it's like, I'm removing all this stuff, but what am I eating, right? What can I actually have that's nutritious and supportive?
So one of the things that we added was we found that phytonutrients or foods from plants were very, very low. She was eating mostly tomatoes, lettuce, bell peppers. So we increased, and there were no spices in her foods either. And she was actually quite interested. One of the things a nutritionist does is we sit down with a client and say, tell me your story and what you like and what you don't like. And we create our plan based on the whole story. It's not just, I'm going to take this sheet of paper and I'm going to give it to you. So, and in fact, we put everything aside and we just listen to the person. So one of the things I said, what else do you want to eat? So it was all about the elimination was, what do you want to eat? I'm telling you what not to eat, but I want you to tell me what you want to eat. And that's how we put it together. She started eating so many. She wanted to eat turmeric. She added oregano, cinnamon, cardamom, cumin, all kinds of, I think there were like from 0 to 13 different spices, fruits and vegetables that were seasonal at that time in South Africa, which it was summer for her and winter for us. So I walked her through the different foods that she could eat, how to make smoothies, how to make stews, and things like that. And she was quite happy to see that she was actually eating a lot of food and not missing out on the coffee and the sugary. She liked to put she put 2 or 3 teaspoons of sugar as well to keep her going, because that was where she was getting her energy from. And the fact that she couldn't eat, once the digestive enzymes started working again, her abdominal pain and bloating went away. So she's like, I actually like eating these foods now. So the elimination diet took out, in her case, just a few things. And I think we took out beef. And then during the reintroduction, we said, try it and see how you like it. And we did find during reintroduction that she didn't do very well with full fat yogurt. She was okay, I think, with lower fat yogurt. She got diarrhea and things like that. When she ate too much high histamine foods, she started getting allergy symptoms, and histamine can also increase pain in the body. And so when she ate too much on the same day, if her histamine bucket filled up very quickly, cashews and mushrooms, and she was like, I'm just, sneezing. And so we pulled back on that. And she said, now I feel better if I just eat either a little bit of cashews or a little bit of mushroom. So you keep tweaking because you're listening to the story that they bring in to the session.
Yeah, I like that, because so often, like before you mentioned nightshades and oxalates, there's not a whole lot of great research on either one of them. More the nightshades than the oxalates. The oxalates, as a professional, I find a little concerning because people read things online about it, and then they feel like there's like glass floating around that is, is getting stuck in their joints, so to speak, and that's not the way it works. Some people have some people have a little bit of a sensitivity to oxalates. Well, in my personal experience, I find that, as you mentioned, with histamine foods, when people decrease them just a little bit, they don't eat too much of it, they're okay. But when you come across people who are eating spinach and kale every day, twice a day, then really what you're saying is, okay, what I've identified here is someone who lacks variety in their diet. And when you lack variety, that's when intolerances can develop. And from that, there's symptoms, right?
Right. Yeah. So lack of variety or lack of food in itself is a problem. So that's why we look at seasonal variations. And that's, and if it was winter, we would have had a little different. And in our case, we actually added sweet potatoes, which is a high oxalate food. I wasn't concerned in her case. And in fact, I'm not very concerned. I've just seen a few people, and there may be other reasons why oxalate is not it's not just food itself. Right. There's always an inflammatory component to that piece, like you mentioned. I prefer adding foods to removing foods.
Yeah, and
because as you said,
and that's what it is, because the microbiome itself produces enzymes that break down or detoxify the oxalates. And if someone's microbiome is not healthy when they come in, but over the course of, as you mentioned, over the course of the study, someone shifts their health, which means their microbiome is shifting from a dysbiotic state to a healthy state, then oftentimes people can then tolerate that food because their entire system is now able to digest, eliminate, assimilate whatever it is that's coming in.
That's right. And that was one of the reasons for increasing the fiber content and polyphenols, which also act as a prebiotic like food to increase bifidobacteria and lactobacillus and those really good bacteria that help also eliminate some of these cytokines, inflammatory signaling molecules as well.
I love the spice forward approach, because so often spices are kind of left out, even though I recommend everyone should have a beautiful spice rack in their kitchen full of all the spices from different cultures. I think it makes nutrition fun, and it makes food fun, and it makes cooking fun. But people don't realize that's where the powerful anti-inflammatory, and in our case, anti-pain or anti-nociceptive ingredients are oftentimes.
Right. Ginger is a great example for that.
What other spices do you recommend to people that are, very anti-inflammatory that can help people with pain?
So all of the spices that are, again, it's seasonal. So in the winters, I like the warming spices like bishop, it's called ajwain, or bishop wheat seeds. Fenugreek is a very anti-inflammatory. There is fennel. That's more of a fennel and coriander can help during the summer seasons. They're cooling spices. So this is coming from more of an Ayurvedic approach to the body type.
Pitta, right?
Right. And pitta increases inflammation. So yeah. If your pitta is balanced, then you're very strong and athletic. So I love the Middle Eastern spices. I like even red chilies, harissa peppers. These are also capsaicin helps. Topical capsaicin is used for pain. Peppermint is interesting. It eliminates mostly GI pain, but it can also give you that calming effect directly, to help with the inflammation, and it mostly improves the GI functions. Many of these spices are also antimicrobial. So if you have pain because of an underlying infection, or you feel you're susceptible to infections, I find that the spice is one of the best armors you can put around yourself. I think I've been eating spices ever since I was born. I've always cultivated a rich, and I have a huge spice array as well. And I introduce all my clients who are not familiar with those to try them.
And it's interesting you mentioned peppers, because peppers have capsaicin, which people know can be helpful for pain and pain management to some extent. And then there are some functional practitioners that look at capsaicin in spicy foods as promoting leaky gut, so to speak. Do you have an opinion or any research you can lean into on that particular topic?
In excess, yes. Even peppers do that. The reason you can absorb better is, and I think it's because you have to understand what kind of permeability this is. Is it transcellular? And I think that's where it is. It's between the cells, but it closes back. It's not something that opens the floodgates like gluten, like the zonulin is all ripped off, which gluten seems to do for a lot of people. Yeah. It seems to bring it back. And it could be there's a threshold for people to, after which it can become an irritant. So I think I may have to go back and look into the research, but I do know that it affects a different kind of permeability than the kind of leaky gut syndrome that people are talking about.
Right. So it could create what's called a transitory permeability, which is temporary.
Right.
Although if you're the kind of person who's eating lots of spicy foods multiple times a day, then it might lead to, more of a long-term problem. But you're right. It's a different intestinal permeability than happens with gluten, where the zonulin molecule can just unlock that connection between each intestinal cell and lead to, longer-term, more concerning intestinal permeability, which is an important factor for those with autoimmune conditions, right?
Exactly.
Yeah,
yes.
It's one of the triggers, right? So we always need a trigger, an intestinal permeability, and then the genetic component to create that autoimmune cascade, basically.
Yes. Yeah. Okay.
Talk to us about, there are specific nutrients in the diet and in foods that can be helpful with pain. Was there a focus on the nutrients, or is that just something that you brought in with, other patients and other work?
So I like to I'll give you the functional medicine perspective on these nutrients. So when you look at pain is inflammation, right? So the pain sits at the crossroads. And this is something that I've created as a talking point with my clients, at the crossroad of your energy system and the immune system. So the energy system is what we call like the redox system, which is very closely related to the mitochondria, which is a mighty organelle that sits inside the cell and tells the cell how to function. It gives the energy, but it is also, if it's not taken care of, it can produce a lot of oxidative stress. So it's something like, one of my analogies is, we pay taxes to build the roads, but we use the roads and the roads break down, and then we pay taxes. So it's something like that. So we have to keep our mitochondria happy. So all the nutrients that keep the mitochondria plastic, because the mitochondria goes through fission and fusion all the time, it goes to mitophagy, which is kind of eating itself up and creating new, fresh mitochondria. And mitochondria loves nutrients. It likes all the B vitamins. It likes antioxidants and like glutathione, CoQ10. And if you've noticed, most people with pain have poor energy, right? So you can, all my people whom I work with who have migraines, I focus on the mitochondria a lot. Neuropathy is also mitochondria. And so B vitamins, like magnesium, CoQ10, glutathione. So selenium, foods that are rich in glutathione by themselves, like there are several blueberries, whey, many fruits and vegetables that contain glutathione. But if you give the precursors, which is all the proteins that are needed, selenium, magnesium, vitamin C, and vitamin B2 for the recycling, then you produce adequate amount of glutathione. There's no need to take any more glutathione. It's best for your endogenous system to create it. Just give the precursors, because it has to be neatly balanced. We don't want to overdo the antioxidants. Eating fruits and vegetables, whole fruits and whole vegetables, they give you things like, all the carotenoids, which are very good to suppress oxidative species, but also luteolin, apigenin, quercetin. All of these are amazing because they can prevent accumulation of white blood cells in cartilage tissue. In fact, they actually found that they protect the cartilage, and they decrease the things like leukotrienes, B4, the ones which are pro-inflammatory. They allow it to come up, but they don't let it proceed forever and ever. So they improve T regulatory cells, which is vitamin D, again, selenium. So when you look at that, so you're looking at the immune system, support everything that supports the immune system, everything supports the mitochondria, bring them together. You can start looking at a set of nutrients that will also help pain. Omega-3 fatty acids, one of the top studied essential fatty acids for pain, because they have such a great influence on the inflammatory process with the eicosanoids, with the leukotrienes, all of those. They can modulate pain because they allow inflammation but they also disallow inflammation. They know how to let it peak and how to let it fall. Yeah. And it's a natural process. So we need an omega-6, especially the GLA. GLA, our body is supposed to produce, but it doesn't produce enough, and it just goes down the arachnoid pathway, which is good because you need some inflammation to start the repair work, but you also need to say, okay, you know what, that's enough. We now need to rebuild and clear the debris. So omega-6 is very good for that. So again, to summarize, think of the mitochondria redox system, think of the immune system, and your nutrients are right there. The other thing to consider is the detoxification system, which is our emunctories, right? Things that allow. So the detoxification is one of the larger organ systems, liver, of course, kidney, intestine. It has several phases of detoxification take place over there, the lungs, the skin. So the idea is if these are working, then the immune system and the redox system are able to function easily. Otherwise, they have to keep fighting against toxicants from the outside world, or even our own endogenously produced steroids that need to be reduced. Too much or too less of testosterone or estrogen or progesterone increases pain.
Yeah, that's why fiber is important, because fiber helps detoxify. Things move through your gut. If you have extra estrogen, fiber absorbs that extra estrogen and facilitates the removal of it. And then always with detoxification, exercise and sweating is so important.
Very much, very much, yeah. And it's in a functional medicine model, we always look at movement, exercise. So in my case, in the case of this client, she was not able to exercise. So and one of the first things you would want to do is start with the sweating, kind of give you that similar idea of, allowing the pores to open. Normally toxic metals can come on, mercury, some PFAs, which is, Teflon-like chemicals, they can come out through the sweat. And so those are important. And then what I do is I like Qigong. If it's possible, I do Qigong every day. I also like something called classical stretch, which is, it was on PBS for years. It's you may or not know this, or maybe some of your listeners do. It's called eccentrics as well, I think, eccentrics. And it's simple stretches, dynamic stretches, which help to, and I have used it for my own hip pain when I was finding problems with that. And then, of course, regular exercise, even lifting, and knowing how to do that correctly with a physiotherapist or a personal trainer can definitely reduce pain in the joints. My favorite is the kettlebell, I think good mornings they're called. It's like a deadlift, but it's not a full deadlift, So I did that for my back, and the traction with the kettlebell, I love it. And so it's to see that, stress is hormetic. It helps to mold the cartilage. Running, walking, all of that gives the cartilage an opportunity. Gravity helps our bone structure, as well as the articulation between the bones, to improve. So these are all tools we have to look at, and we always trying to move the client towards those important pieces of health.
That's a nice integrative approach, which we definitely support here. I know you wanted to mention some data, some outcomes that you saw from a clinical program, and about those outcomes kind of on a broader level. Like, what happens when you effectively change someone's nutrition? What can be expected beyond pain relief?
Right. So in the nutrition program, we had about 17 different clients, and I think 6 to 8 different nutritionists, so about 2 per, because that's what the time was allocated for us. And what we found is we started off with looking at the medical symptoms questionnaire. We took a score, which is, it says, it breaks down the score system by head, nose, different body parts, so that it's easy for the client to mark. And we found that everyone came in with GI issues, bloating, fatigue was huge, pain different types of pain, some musculoskeletal, some joint pain, headaches. And then there were people who had menstrual issues. There were people who couldn't gain weight and some people who couldn't lose weight. So what we found was, so we just took it down and we said for all these people, inflammation is one of the root causes. Whatever it is, we're going to try and remove immunogenic foods, replace with phytonutrients, proper amounts of protein, carbs, and fats. We did not reduce. We took into account, like I said, I increased the nutrition, total calories. There were some who reduced it, but within the same framework. And what we found was all these chief complaints, including fatty liver, as assessed by evidenced by lab reports, fatty liver, GERD, a lot of upper GI issues, a person who hadn't been able to gain weight for years. And she also did not have proper menstrual cycles. That recovered completely. A person who had long-term candida infections, it went away. Almost everyone, and this is true, 100% of the participants said that their emotional state was so much better. It was like as if a cloud had been lifted. And it started off very much in the very beginning. And so the question, of course, is it because they have comfort to be able to talk to a nutritionist? Are they able to work things out with them? Is it because, it could be that. It could also be that the anti-inflammatory foods and removal, almost everybody had to take out alcohol. I think more than 80% of the clients were taking out, all women were drinking some amount of alcohol every day, sometimes every week. And wheat,
which is more than the recommended allowance.
Exactly.
Typically, like in one serving of alcohol 4 times a week for a woman, and people don't realize a serving of alcohol is about 4 ounces versus when you go to a bar or restaurant, a glass of wine they typically serve you is between 8 to 12 ounces.
I know it's true. There's 3 servings in one shot, right? And if you do it twice,
that's it.
So
you met your requirement real fast.
Exactly. So there were people who had allergies to pork, which was interesting. Several people had allergies and sensitivities to wheat, but not all. And so the reintroduction phase allows us to distinguish between this. We don't want to just remove foods for the heck of it, just like I said. We want to make it evidence-based and we want to make it personalized. And there was a person who couldn't lose weight, who lost weight, who, and like I said, they gained weight. So we could see opposite spectrums on the same diet. And that's beauty. That's the beauty of how the body works when it's given the right. It knows how to bring it back to homeostasis or back to the homeodynamic state, if you want to look at it that way, because the nutrition affects every single node of our body, our matrix, that we are. It affects assimilation, it affects energy production, it affects detoxification, it affects hormones, it affects transportation, all the lymphatic system, the endothelial system. It affects the structure, and we know that, function follows form. So if the form is all deformed, the cellular structure, if you have too much lipid peroxidation, and that could be even based on the way you're cooking your food, not just the foods you're eating, but if it's fried, over-baked, over-barbecued, and all of those things, you just add more phytonutrients to quell the oxidative stress produced by these compounds that can come out from cooking. So structural damages, when the cell structure starts becoming clean and fresh, in our intestine, every 3 days we have new cells forming, right? 3 to 5 days, and and that's why the 3-week period gives you 3 to 6 weeks, gives you enough time to, if you do it well, and you provide the nutrients for cell growth, like glutamine, for example, and to nourish the microbiome, then we get new cells. New cells means new function. So structure. So all the basis of everything is the food and nutrients you're providing. And so that's why we saw all the changes.
Yeah, and you really can see changes within 2 weeks, as you mentioned before. Within 2 weeks of optimizing someone's diet and nutrition, they'll start to say, I feel better. I'm sleeping better. I have less brain fog. My joints don't hurt as much, et cetera, which is really important. I also know, as we start to wrap up, I want to make sure we touch on EFT, or emotional freedom technique. I know that EFT is something that you use in practice. People also know it as tapping. Can you talk to us about that and the impact you've seen with it?
Yes, it's a wonderful question. Actually, I was an EFT practitioner before I became a nutritionist.
Oh, interesting.
I have a background in computer science engineering, and when I was at home taking care of my children, I just started I wanted to learn something about health, expand my repertoire, and so I wanted something that was a self-help tool, something I could do at home, something I could teach my children, because we were all having some health problems or the other. And I found Dr. Gary Craig, who's the founder of Emotional Freedom Techniques. And now I think it's called tapping more. That's the popular term. And I learned it, and I almost instantly got it. So what it is it's tapping is a form of acupressure, but it's a form of emotional acupressure. The idea is to tap on the endpoints of the meridian system, that the traditional Chinese meridian system that acupuncturists use. And what they found is when you have an emotional trauma, there is a disruption in the flow of energy in the meridian system. And as this, if it's unresolved, if the trauma is not resolved, it continues to put a pressure on these energy systems. We are trying to come back online, but even other incidents that are similar to the incident of trauma can cause the meridian system to go out of alignment. And constantly, when this is repeated, it becomes physical. It turns into a physical problem. It could be any problem: anxiety, sleep, insomnia, and pain. And pain is probably the most common first thing people see: migraines, TMJ, back pain, and so on. And as a part of the integrative philosophy, I don't have any dogmatic approach that everyone has to do nutrition. I have worked with people who cannot implement nutrition as part of their protocol. So I'm open. I would like them to feel well, and I want to give them the tools. So nutrition is a tool you can use at home. You learn to cook, you learn to read labels, whatever you need to do. So I worked with a child who had ulcerative colitis. He was in deep pain. I could not talk to him about nutrition. His parents were not able to follow all of these things. But yet with tapping and with visualization, I was able to bring some relief to this child, actually quite a bit of relief. I've worked with war veterans who've come who have a lot of joint pain, lot of musculoskeletal pain. And in fact, one of the veterans was the one who introduced me to different people in my neighborhood. And he would walk with me and sit with me in all the sessions. And he took permission, and we would tap, he would tap. And I said, why are you coming with me all, is it like, I thought he was like a chaperone, but he said, no, I feel great every time I tap. I don't even care for the words you're using or how you're working with the person. When I sit in that room, I feel better. And my pain has drastically come down since I started working with you. And I don't want to miss a single session. So for him, it was a lot of fun to just walk around with me. And I loved it too, because I felt very happy to have him in the room, and people felt happy. So what it is to tap on the endpoints of these meridian system and think, and it depends, and I personalize it to the extent that I can. In fact, we go really deep. I zoom out and I zoom in. For pain, I start with simple things like visualizing. Does it have a color? Does it have a texture? Does it have a feeling? Does it have a person? Does it have a story? And within 3 rounds, people are telling me stories. And they're like, oh my God, it's typically a shame. Somebody scolded you and you felt really badly hurt. And that shame becomes anger, because you cannot go back and tell that maybe it's a person of authority. But you can't go and say, you did, I don't like it, I was right, you were wrong. You can never say that to a person of authority, right? When you're young and you hold it in your stomach, or, and we tap this and we forgive. Typically there's a bit of forgiving, and then we do a round of gratitude. And then I ask them to do affirmations on their own or with me. So to get to the point when you can make affirmations, to say that, to seal in the goodness, you have to first accept that something went wrong and you're okay with it and you let it go. It's a process of letting go. And that releases the pain. And I've seen this work over and over again, even when people have tried all kinds of things, including nutrition, and there's a chronicity over there. I like to step back and pull and, pull the arrow a little bit further back into the emotional and spiritual state of the person and say, would you like to work with me on some other issues that may be bothering you? And almost immediately the answer is yes, because they know, and it's a relief. So it's another tool. I've used it since 2009. So it's much longer than I've been a nutritionist. And for a while I was not doing it. And just like I told you, there are positions when I feel that the person needs extra help, then I introduce them to EFT, and then they are able to do it at home.
So use that really as a vehicle to start to, no pun intended, but tap into the psychological and the emotional aspects of someone's care.
That's right. Yeah. That's exactly right.
And it's quick and easy, right? It's a pretty easy intervention as far as you don't need any equipment. You can do it either in person or you could do it virtually. So it becomes easy and approachable for people.
Exactly. And it's just, when you feel stuck, it's the art of delivery that I learned through Barry Craig. You make it humorous, you make it easy, you make it effortless, you make it, I like to draw analogies and people start laughing and they're like, well, it's a little funny now, because ultimately we're all healing, machines. We automatically should come back to normal. We go through a problem, that's fine, but we should come back to, a level basis homeostasis. But if it's not, we just have to, to fine tune a few aspects. And I always try to make it effortless. I don't want and to drop every sense of judgment that the person has, because sometimes with nutrition and other things, I feel that sometimes they just feel, I really want to do this, but I cannot. And the moment they tell me that, we stop and we tap. It's okay. It's fine. Let's not make this a point of pain for you, this change. So we tap on that and the person comes back to me with 5 different recipes. I'm like, wow, how did you? She said, I just felt it was easy now.
Yeah.
And so EFT helps you make things effortless. It just removes those hindrances. And because we all have our great gifts and creativity, and we know are intuitively inside how we can heal ourselves. And your creative aspects start coming, the gifts that you have start coming out. And I feel you just, have this EFT is one more tool in the toolbox to bring you into that healing space.
Yeah, overcoming some barriers are really important as you start to heal. And what might seem obvious, like, oh, you need to change your nutrition, but sometimes there's a little bit of work that has to be done before your, stages of change, before you're willing to get to that point and make the changes. Sometimes there has to be something a little bit more to support. Aparna, it's been great speaking with you today, learning about functional nutrition and obviously the importance of functional nutrition for people with chronic pain and other chronic illnesses. Let our followers know how they can learn more about you.
So I do have a website which is under construction. And because I have this idea, different ideas coming in my mind, and because I also work full-time at the University of Western States, and I do part-time nutrition consult and EFT. So what I'm doing now is I'm actually connecting with practitioners like you, and they are sending me their clients if they feel that they need nutrition support or EFT. It's just for the next few months as I transition between 2 different, working with the school, which I love, as well as taking clients that, the reason I'm doing this, I want to make sure that the client is supported by multiple, it takes a village. So, and I found that that kind, when they know that they're coming and they have other support, they're very open, we're able to go further and do a lot more work. So for the time being, it is only a referral. You can, on my website, there's still a contact form. And so if I know somebody's referring me to someone, it could also be from a friend refers, a client refers a friend. That does happen, but practitioners have been referring, and that's worked out well for me now.
And what's the URL so we can point people to it?
It's rasalifenutrition.com. Rasa means in Sanskrit, it means, it's actually the lymphatic system. So in the very base, the first layer of the tissue systems in Ayurveda, rasa means emotion. Rasa means taste, and rasa means flow. So I love the word because it combines everything I do and everything I feel is true. It brings true healing. Emotions need to be tapped in. Your life essence, your tastes, your hobbies need to be tapped in. Nutrition itself and the lymphatic system, which to me represents the physical nature of healing. So Rasa Life Nutrition.
Great. So that link, of course, is available on the show notes at the Integrative Pain Science Institute.com. You can find it on the podcast page for this week's episode. Again, I want to thank Aparna for being here. Make sure you share this episode with your friends and family on social media and anywhere people are talking about the impact of nutrition for chronic pain. I'm Dr. Joe Tatta. Thank you for joining me this week, and we'll see you next week.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for listening to the Healing Pain Podcast with Dr. Joe Tatta. To subscribe to the podcast and learn more, visit integrativepainscienceinstitute.com. That's Integrative Pain Science Institute.com. Sign up to receive weekly updates, leave a review on iTunes, and share this episode with your friends.